Sirens wailed in the cold distance, but inside O'Malley's diner, the air was suffocatingly silent. 30 heavily armed men had just cornered Chicago's most feared syndicate leader. It was supposed to be a flawless execution. Instead, a minimum-wage waitress holding a coffee pot was about to rewrite underworld history. Porcelain clinked against cracked formica as Charlie Josephine Reyes wiped down the counter of O'Malley's all-night diner. It was 2:14 a.m. on a bitter Tuesday in Chicago. Outside, frost clung to the edges of the plate glass windows, obscuring the flickering neon sign that buzzed like an angry hornet. Inside, the air hung heavy with the permanent scent of oxidized fry grease, bleached mops, and burnt decaf. Charlie was 24, severely sleep-deprived, and drowning in $80,000 of nursing school debt. She worked the grueling 10 to 6 graveyard shift because it was the only way she could attend her clinical rotations during the day. Her life was a relentless cycle of textbooks, lukewarm coffee, and aching arches. She was a ghost in her own life, moving through the motions just to survive the week. Then the brass bell above the front door chimed. A blast of sub-zero wind swept through the diner, scattering a stack of paper napkins. Charlie looked up instinctively, reaching for a fresh menu, but paused. Leonardo Carmine Rossi stepped into the fluorescent light. Even to someone completely disconnected from the city's criminal underbelly, Leonardo Rossi commanded a terrifying gravity. He was the undisputed capo of the Rossi Syndicate, an empire built on shipping logistics, real estate, and shadows. Tonight, however, the immaculately tailored 34-year-old looked less like a king and more like a man walking to his own funeral. His charcoal-bespoke suit was torn at the left shoulder. A dark, ugly shadow of a bruise was already blooming along his sharp jawline. His silver silk tie had been discarded, his collar unbuttoned, and his usually piercing grey eyes were clouded with a profound, bone-deep exhaustion. Charlie knew him only as Leo, the quiet, imposing regular who came in once a month, sat in corner booth, number 4 ordered his coffee black, and always left a folded $100 bill under his saucer. She liked him. He never leered, never made demands, and always treated her with a quiet, solemn respect that was rare in this part of the city. Leonardo moved slowly toward his usual booth and slid into the red vinyl seat. He didn't take off his overcoat. He simply rested his hands flat on the table, staring out the frost-covered window into the empty, snow-dusted parking lot. Charlie grabbed a ceramic mug and the glass carafe of fresh, dark roast, walking over to his table. "Rough night, Leo?" she asked softly, keeping her tone carefully neutral. Leonardo pulled his gaze away from the window and looked up at her. For a fraction of a second, the cold, hardened exterior of the Mafia Boss cracked, revealing a man who had just watched his world burn to ash. "You could say that, Charlie," he replied, his voice a low, gravelly baritone. "The kind of night that doesn't usually end with a sunrise." Charlie poured his coffee, the dark liquid steaming in the frigid air of the diner. "Well, you're safe in here. The worst thing you'll face tonight is my manager's cherry pie. It's been sitting in the case since Sunday." A faint, humorless smile touched the corners of Leonardo's mouth. He reached into his overcoat and pulled out a thick, unmarked manila envelope. He slid it across the table until it touched the base of Charlie's mug. "What's this?" Charlie asked, her brow furrowing. "Your tuition," Leonardo said quietly, "and a severance package. I need you to walk into the kitchen, take your coat, and leave through the back alley door. Right now, do not stop for your textbooks. Do not look back. Just walk away, Charlie." Charlie stared at the envelope. It was thick enough to hold tens of thousands of dollars. Her heart gave a sudden, painful lurch against her ribs. The exhaustion vanished, replaced by a cold spike of adrenaline. "Leo, I can't take this," she stammered, taking a step back. "And I can't just abandon my shift." "What are you talking about?" Leonardo's eyes darkened, the urgency bleeding through his calm facade. "Charlie, please. I am a dead man sitting in a diner. My underboss sold my compound to a rival family an hour ago. I led them here to buy my mother and sister enough time to get to O'Hare and get airborne. This is the end of the line for me. It does not have to be for you. Go." Before Charlie could process the sheer gravity of his words, a blinding light swept across the diner's interior. Through the frost-webbed windows, a convoy of 6 massive black Lincoln Navigators aggressively jumped the curb, their heavy tires crunching over the iced asphalt. They boxed the diner in, completely blocking the front entrance, the side windows, and the street access. The headlights cut through the darkness, like searchlights illuminating the dust motes dancing in the diner's air. Charlie gasped, dropping the coffee carafe. It shattered against the checkerboard linoleum, sending scalding black coffee splashing across the floor. Leonardo didn't flinch. He didn't reach for a weapon. He simply picked up his ceramic mug, took a slow, deliberate sip of the burning liquid, and sighed. "Too late," Leonardo murmured. "Get behind the counter, Charlie. Keep your head down. Close your eyes." The heavy, synchronized thud of car doors slamming shut echoed through the frozen night. Shadows moved against the glass, dozens of them. The ambient street noise vanished, replaced by the terrifying mechanical clicks of firearms being readied. Charlie backed away slowly, her breath catching in her throat, her hands trembling uncontrollably. She slipped behind the main service counter, crouching near the ancient mechanical cash register, her mind desperately trying to bridge the gap between her mundane nursing studies and the violent reality unfolding in front of her. The heavy brass bell above the door chimed a final cheerful note before the heavy oak door was violently kicked inward. The wood splintered against the wall with a deafening crack. Donato Vitiello stepped over the threshold. Donato was a ruthless, ambitious predator, draped in a camel hair overcoat, puffing lazily on a Churchill cigar. Behind him, a tidal wave of armed men poured into the small diner. They moved with terrifying tactical precision, fanning out to cover every window, every exit, and every blind spot. Charlie huddled behind the counter with her hands clamped over her mouth, counted them in a blind panic. 10, 20, 30. 30 men crammed into a space meant to seat 40 patrons. They carried suppressed submachine guns, tactical shotguns, and heavy-caliber pistols. The sheer volume of bodies made the diner feel instantly suffocating. Donato walked slowly down the center aisle, his expensive leather shoes crunching over the shards of Charlie's broken coffee pot. He stopped 10 feet from booth number 4. "Leonardo." Donato said, his voice dripping with mock pity. "Look at you, the great untouchable Rossi patriarch, sitting alone in a grease pit drinking swamp water. How the mighty have fallen." Leonardo remained seated. He didn't look at the 30 muzzles pointed directly at his chest. He looked calmly at Donato. "Donato," Leonardo replied evenly. "It took 30 men for you to feel safe enough to stand in the same room as me. I'm flattered." Donato's jaw tightened, his false smile slipping for a fraction of a second. "Your arrogance is going to die with you tonight, Leo. Your compound is mine. Your operations on the docks are currently being seized. Frankie handed over the encryption keys 20 minutes ago." Leonardo's grip on his mug tightened ever so slightly, the only outward sign that the mention of his trusted lieutenant's betrayal had struck a nerve. "Frankie always was a coward. He'll betray you too, Donato. It's in his nature." "Perhaps," Donato chuckled, taking a long drag of his cigar and blowing the smoke toward the ceiling. "But I won't be foolish enough to turn my back on him like you did. This is a new era, Leo. The old ways are dead. The Rossi name ends right here, right now, on a dirty diner floor. From her hiding spot, Charlie was paralyzed. Her nursing instincts, drilled into her through countless high-pressure trauma simulations, were screaming at her to assess, triage, and act. But there was no medical protocol for an execution. Then, one of Donato's point men, a massive enforcer with a scarred neck, spotted the edge of Charlie's pink uniform skirt protruding from behind the counter. "Boss," the enforcer grunted, pointing his suppressed pistol toward the cash register. "We got a civilian?" Donato didn't even turn his head. He kept his dead eyes locked on Leonardo. "No witnesses. Kill the waitress first. I want Leo to watch an innocent die because of his failure." Leonardo surged upward, slamming his palms onto the table. "She has nothing to do with this. Let her walk, Donato. You have me. Shoot the girl." Donato ordered coldly. The enforcer took a step toward the counter, raising his weapon, his finger tightening on the trigger. In that microscopic sliver of a second, Charlie Josephine Reyes realized she was going to die. She wasn't going to graduate. She wasn't going to save lives. She was going to bleed out next to a deep fryer. Unless she did something completely, utterly insane. Her eyes darted frantically around the cramped space beneath the counter. Her gaze locked onto a heavy red industrial lever, bolted to the wall beneath the cash register. O'Malley's diner was ancient, a relic from the Prohibition era that had undergone a dozen cheap renovations. But the paranoid previous owner, terrified of grease fires, had installed a military-grade, over-engineered Ansel chemical fire suppression system. Charlie's manager had warned her, on her first day, never touch the red lever. It's hardwired to the main electrical breaker. You pull that the power dies, and it drops enough chemical foam to suffocate an elephant. Charlie also knew something else. Behind the walk-in freezer in the kitchen, hidden behind a false wall of shelving, was an old rusted steel hatch. A bootlegger's tunnel that led directly into the city's vast storm drain network. The Mafia Boss was outnumbered 30-1. Until the waitress made one move. As the enforcer leaned over the counter to put a bullet in her head, Charlie threw her entire body weight backward, her hands latching onto the cold steel of the red lever, yanking it down with every ounce of strength she possessed. Clack boom, the master breaker severed. The diner was plunged into absolute pitch-black darkness. Before the hitmen could even register the loss of light explosive charges in the ceiling vents, detonated with a deafening mechanical screech. Thousands of gallons of thick, blinding, fire-retardant chemical foam blasted downward at high velocity. Complete chaos erupted. The hitmen screamed as the dense foam coated their eyes, their throats, and the mechanisms of their weapons. Blinded, suffocating and panicked, someone pulled a trigger. A gunshot rang out, shattering a window. That single shot triggered a domino effect. The heavily armed men began firing blindly into the darkness, muzzle flashes illuminating the churning white cloud of foam like lightning trapped inside a hurricane. Bullets tore through the vinyl booths, shattered the glass pie cases, and ripped into the ceiling. Charlie didn't hesitate. She low-crawled furiously around the edge of the counter, the foam already piling up on the floor. She found Leonardo exactly where he had been standing. She grabbed the lapel of his ruined bespoke suit and yanked hard. "Follow me!" she screamed over the deafening roar of gunfire and hissing chemicals. Leonardo, stunned, but possessing the instincts of a survivor, didn't argue. He dropped low, letting the waitress drag him toward the swinging kitchen doors. They burst into the kitchen. The suppression system was firing here too, turning the prep area into a white-out blizzard. Charlie navigated by pure muscle memory, dodging the fryers and the prep tables. She hit the heavy metal handle of the walk-in freezer, shoved Leonardo inside, and threw her weight against the door, slamming it shut. The heavy insulation instantly muffled the chaotic gunfire outside. The temperature inside the freezer was below zero. Charlie scrambled over boxes of frozen beef and bags of ice, her hands bleeding as she frantically tore down the back shelving unit. "Help me," she yelled, her breath pluming in the freezing air. Leonardo snapped out of his shock, his eyes locking onto the rusted iron wheel of the hidden hatch. He grabbed it with both hands, his muscles straining against the decades of rust and grime. With a horrific screech of metal, the wheel turned. He hoisted the heavy iron door upward, revealing a pitch-black vertical shaft, smelling of damp earth and sewage. Behind them, the freezer door shuddered violently as heavy-caliber bullets began chewing through the steel hinges. "Ladies first," Leonardo breathed, holding the hatch open. Charlie swung her legs over the edge and dropped into the darkness. Leonardo followed a second later, pulling the heavy iron lid shut just as the freezer door blew completely off its hinges, sealing them in the pitch-black silence of the underground. The drop into the bootlegger's tunnel was jarring. Charlie hit the ground hard, the breath driven from her lungs as her knees scraped against damp, uneven cobblestone. Above them, the heavy iron hatch slammed shut instantly, plunging them into a darkness so absolute it felt physical. Seconds later, a muted rhythmic thudding reverberated through the ceiling, Donato's men trying to shoot the rusted lock mechanism. Leonardo landed beside her, with a sharp, suppressed intake of breath. The metallic snap of a Zippo lighter echoed in the narrow space, and a flickering orange flame illuminated the claustrophobic brick walls of the drainage tunnel. "Keep moving," Leonardo commanded, his voice tight. "That hatch won't hold them forever. This tunnel runs parallel to the subway lines and empties out near the old shipping canal." Charlie scrambled to her feet, her pink Waitress uniform soaked in freezing, chemically tainted water, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. As the flame cast dancing shadows across Leonardo's face, Charlie noticed the dark, heavy wetness spreading down the left sleeve of his charcoal suit. "You're hit," she said, her nursing instincts overriding her paralyzing fear. "It's a ricochet," Leonardo grunted, already turning to walk down the sloping tunnel. "It missed the artery. I'll survive." "If you bleed out in the dark, I'm stuck down here without a map," Charlie shot back, grabbing his uninjured arm and forcing him to stop. "Sit down on that pipe, now." Leonardo blinked momentarily, taken aback by the sheer authority in her voice. He was a man who commanded legions, a boss whose mere whisper could dictate the fate of millions of dollars and countless lives. Yet here in the freezing mud of a forgotten Chicago sewer, a 24-year-old nursing student was ordering him around. To his own surprise, he obeyed, settling onto a rusted outflow pipe. Charlie knelt beside him. She took the Zippo from his hand and set it on a dry brick to give them light. Without hesitation, she gripped the collar of his ruined bespoke jacket and pulled it down, exposing the bleeding wound on his shoulder. A jagged piece of shrapnel from the freezer door had torn through his bicep. "Hold still," she instructed. She ripped the heavy fabric of her diner apron into long, sturdy strips. "You're remarkably calm for someone who just declared war on the Vitiello syndicate," Leonardo observed, wincing slightly as her cold fingers worked quickly over his torn flesh. "I work the night shift in a diner where people routinely pull knives over cold hash browns," Charlie muttered, wrapping the fabric tight and tying a brutal, efficient pressure knot. "I'm also 70 grand in debt and failing pharmacology. A mob hit is just the cherry on top of a really bad week." A genuine low chuckle escaped Leonardo's chest, the sound startling in the grim environment. "Charlie Josephine Reyes, I severely underestimated you." She looked up, her face inches from his in the dim light. The adrenaline had stripped away the polite, invisible barrier that usually separated a customer from a waitress. She saw the exhaustion in his grey eyes, but also a fierce, burning resilience. And he saw a woman whose grit was tougher than the hardened criminals he employed. "Why did you do it?" Leonardo asked softly, his gaze locked onto hers. "I gave you an envelope with enough cash to disappear. You could have walked out the back door. Instead, you dropped the power and dragged me into a freezer. You risked everything." Charlie finished the knot and wiped her bloody hands on her skirt. "Because you looked at me." Leonardo frowned. "What?" "When they came in," she explained, picking up the lighter. "Donato ordered them to kill me. You tried to stop him. In all the time I've worked there, you're the only person who ever looked at me like I was a human being, not just a machine meant to pour coffee. I wasn't going to let them shoot you in my diner." A profound silence settled between them, broken only by the steady drip of condensation falling from the arched brick ceiling. In that fleeting moment, the foundation of a ruthless underworld empire shifted. Leonardo reached out his uninjured hand, gently brushing a damp lock of hair from Charlie's cheek. His touch was surprisingly warm against the freezing air. "I swear to you, Charlie," Leonardo vowed, his voice dropping to a gravelly whisper, "if we walk out of these tunnels alive, you will never worry about a single thing in this world ever again." Before Charlie could process the weight of his promise, a heavy metallic clang echoed from far down the tunnel behind them. The hatch had given way. The sweeping beams of tactical flashlights pierced the distant darkness, accompanied by the frantic splashing of combat boots hitting the flooded floor. "They're inside," Leonardo said, his demeanor instantly shifting back to ice-cold pragmatism. He grabbed the lighter and extinguished the flame. "Run!" They tore through the darkness, relying entirely on touch and Leonardo's memory of the underground labyrinth. The air grew thicker, smelling strongly of rust and stagnant river water. Behind them, the echoing shouts of Donato's hitmen grew steadily louder, their flashlight beams occasionally catching the curvature of the brick walls. "Left here," Leonardo hissed, pulling Charlie down a narrow maintenance corridor. They emerged into a massive, cavernous subterranean chamber. It was an abandoned pump station, a relic from the city's old water management system. Giant rusted turbines loomed in the shadows like sleeping iron leviathans. Moonlight filtered weakly through heavy iron grates 30 feet above them, casting long, eerie shadows across the concrete floor. Leonardo didn't hesitate. He led Charlie toward the largest pump casing, dropping to his knees and running his hands frantically along the base. "What are you looking for?" Charlie gasped, clutching her side as she struggled to catch her breath. "Donato thinks I'm a fool who walks blindly into a trap," Leonardo replied, his fingers finding a loose iron plate. He pried it back, revealing a waterproof pelican case hidden in the recess. "He thought because Frankie betrayed me, I had nothing left. But I knew Frankie was a rat 3 weeks ago." Charlie stared as Leonardo flipped the latches on the case. Inside sat a heavy suppressed Glock 19, an encrypted satellite phone, and a pristine medical kit. "The diner wasn't a random stop," Leonardo continued, rapidly checking the pistol's magazine. "It was my extraction point. I just didn't expect Donato to send 30 men. I expected 10. Your move with the fire suppression system bought me exactly what I needed time." He powered on the satellite phone. It found a signal through the grating above. He pressed a single speed dial button. "It's done," Leonardo said into the receiver. "We are at the rendezvous point. Green light." He tossed the phone aside and handed Charlie the medical kit. "Get behind that turbine, Charlie. Keep your head down. It's about to get very loud." She obeyed, scrambling behind the massive curve of the rusted iron machine. She clutched her knees to her chest, her heart in her throat. A moment later, Donato Vitiello and 8 of his heavily armed men spilled into the pump station. They fanned out their flashlight beams, sweeping the vast room until they locked onto Leonardo, who was standing perfectly still in the center of the chamber, his uninjured arm resting casually at his side. Donato stepped forward, panting slightly, his expensive overcoat ruined by mud and chemical foam. He leveled his pistol at Leonardo's chest. "End of the line, Leo." Donato spat, wiping a smear of grease from his cheek. No more tricks. No more waitresses with fire alarms. Just you, me, and a shallow grave beneath the river. Leonardo smiled. It was a terrifying, feral expression that sent a chill straight down Charlie's spine. "You always were short-sighted, Donato," Leonardo said calmly. "You thought you bought my inner circle. You only bought the trash I was ready to throw away." "Shoot him!" Donato screamed to his men. Before a single trigger could be pulled, the iron grates 30 feet above them exploded inward with deafening force. Thick smoke grenades plummeted into the chamber, erupting into dense, blinding grey clouds. Rappelling ropes dropped from the street level. Within seconds, a dozen heavily armored operatives, clad in matte black tactical gear, descended into the room, their weapons equipped with laser sights, cutting through the smoke like crimson razors. These were the Ghosts, Leonardo's true inner circle, an elite paramilitary unit, loyal only to the Rossi Patriarch. The ambush was absolute and devastating. Silenced weapons coughed rhythmically in the dark. Donato's hitmen, caught entirely off guard and blinded by the smoke, dropped to the concrete floor before they even realized they were flanked. The skirmish lasted less than 10 seconds. When the smoke began to clear, Donato was the only one left standing. The ambitious predator had been reduced to a trembling coward. He dropped his weapon as 3 red laser dots painted his chest. Leonardo walked slowly toward him, the Glock loose in his hand. "A new era, you said," Leonardo murmured, pressing the cold barrel of his pistol directly against Donato's forehead. "Let this be the first lesson of that new era. The Rossi family does not forget, and we do not forgive." Leonardo squeezed the trigger. The loud crack echoed through the chamber, and Donato collapsed, his ambitions dying with him on the wet concrete floor. The room fell deathly silent, save for the dripping water. The tactical team instantly secured the perimeter, moving with silent precision. The commander of the unit stepped forward, offering Leonardo a fresh overcoat to cover his torn suit. "The compound is secured, boss," the commander reported quietly. "Frankie has been dealt with. Your mother and sister are safe in the air." "Good," Leonardo said, slipping the coat over his good shoulder. He turned away from the carnage and walked over to the rusted turbine. He holstered his weapon and extended his hand down to Charlie. She looked up at him, her face pale, her uniform ruined, but her eyes burning with an undeniable, unshakable strength. "It's over," Leonardo said softly. "You're safe." Charlie reached up and took his hand. He pulled her to her feet effortlessly. "My debt?" she asked, a faint, breathless smile touching her lips, despite the chaos surrounding them. "Erased," Leonardo promised, his thumb gently brushing across her knuckles. "But I have a new proposition for you, Charlie Josephine Reyes. A woman who can outsmart a cartel with a fire alarm and patch a bullet wound in a sewer shouldn't be pouring coffee." "What are you offering?" she asked, her heart racing for an entirely different reason now. "Everything," Leonardo replied, his eyes filled with a fierce, possessive loyalty. "My world is dangerous, but if you stand by my side, I swear to God you will rule it." Charlie looked at the defeated enemies, the loyal soldiers, and finally the scarred, magnetic man holding her hand. The diner was gone. Her old life was gone. And as she tightened her grip on Leonardo's hand, she realized she didn't miss it at all. "I hope you like your coffee," Black Leo, Charlie whispered. Because I'm done serving. Did this heart-pounding tale of underworld loyalty and an ordinary woman's extraordinary courage keep you on the edge of your seat? The shadows of Chicago hold countless more secrets, and we are just getting started. If you loved this intense mafia romance drama, hit that like button, share it with your fellow thrill seekers, and subscribe to our channel. Drop a comment below telling us what you think Charlie's first move as a mafia queen should be.